Have you ever wondered who is behind the brand Mormino? They have the most amazing vinyls, the amazing products, and some amazing tools. And now they have a studio where you can go and take lessons to make a bag. How exciting is that? Hi, I'm Jill, and welcome to Bag Chat. So you may have figured who I am talking about. I am talking about Lauren from Mormino. Welcome to the show, Lauren. It is so good to have you here.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
So, as most of you know, I'm in New Zealand and a lot of my guests are all over the world. So I really appreciate Lauren taking the time out of her afternoon for her, and I'm morning. But it's great that she's able to do that because we all know she is crazy busy. So the first questions I always ask my guests, Lauren, is how did you start to sew?
I remember when I was maybe 7 or 8, I was trying to make gifts for friends with my mom's sewing machine. I specifically remember doing like a frog applique pillow. I don't know if I had any like training or maybe my mom helped me or I was just the kind of kid who's like, I'll figure it out. Don't worry about it. But yeah, I remember making that. And then I had some lessons with an aunt of mine. She showed me like how to cut out a paper pattern, how to cut a pair of pants. So that was what I remember being more formal. But other than that, I'm pretty much self-taught.
That's awesome. And that's how we get to be a little bit sideways with our sewing, I call it. Like, I'm not one for following a pattern. And from what I've seen of your YouTube, you like to throw some inspiration in there too.
Yeah, pretty much.
So it sounds like you started to sew that way with an applique frog. That's pretty advanced.
Yeah.
Oh, so how did it transition into bag making?
Yeah. I took a bit of a break, and then I remember one Black Friday, my boyfriend, now husband, bought me a sewing machine on Black Friday deal. It was like $75, and I would do a couple of different things with it. I started making doll clothing and then progressed into like pouches, and then from selling pouches, someone was like, can you make a bag? And I was like, why not? So then I started making bags.
And you've just run with that, obviously, because you have just blown up with your bag making. It is so exciting.
Yeah.
So if anyone's in the Facebook groups, you would have heard of Lauren, I'm sure, and you would have heard of her business, Mormino. Where did that name come from, Lauren, and how did you start the business?
So Mormino is actually my last name. So Mormino is the business name, is my last name spelled out phonetically. And that mostly started as like my brand for my handmade bags. And then when I switched into mostly selling supplies as well, it just kind of stuck. But I've always wondered if I should change it, but it's been too long now.
And we've all come to know that. And I think because it reflects who you are, I think it makes it more personal.
Yeah.
So I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
So with the background of sewing bags, was there any keystone moments in that journey that really cemented this is what you were going to do for you?
None that I can like vividly recall, if I'm being honest. Like, and it's been such a long journey that I don't know, I just keep rolling with it.
Because you are obviously very skilled and got a great eye for craft. So you've done lots of things, I imagine, in the past, not just sewing.
Yeah.
But this has obviously really taken off. So let's look at Mormino. What products do you specialize in? What's your main line?
So we started with hardware. So I would say that is our base, our foundation for the business. I was creating so many bags and not finding the quality hardware that I really loved, or not being able to find it in quantity or like the styles I needed. So I purchased to have it on hand here, and then I started selling the excess. And then becoming a mom and not having as much time to sew, my business kind of flipped into selling more supplies than selling bags.
So was that out of necessity at that time? Obviously you were a new mum as well. Yeah.
Definitely. And it was a way for me to still feel creative, since I design all of my own fabrics. So that would get me to sit down and draw, paint, which is what I wanted to go to school for, was art and painting. So it kind of gives me this jumping off point of being able to still tap into that side that I love so much.
Okay, so your fabrics, for example, your rose fabric, that is, I think, one of your signature range. You've painted that design, have you?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. I cheat. Yeah. I use digital, but that's awesome.
Yeah, I do a bit of both. A lot of mine start out as actual like watercolor paintings or acrylic paintings that I'll then scan in and kind of digitally manipulate. in different ways. So I find that to be more fun since, again, when I started creating and when I felt like myself, it was through painting. So it's nice to be able to use that avenue.
So can you step us through the process? Like you come up with a design and how
Mhm.
does that then turn into a product?
So generally what I will do is when I find the time, or maybe I'm just sitting at the table with Dorothy and she's painting and I'm painting too, I just kind of go for it. I don't necessarily have a reference, or sometimes I'll buy a bunch of flowers and paint those, but it starts with that. And then after a while, when I find the time, maybe 3 months later, I'll scan it in and just kind of sit there and edit the background out, or, copy different pieces, change colors, and create the seamless pattern. And then I'll usually create several variations from that just to see which one's better. I'll change the colors a whole bunch, and then I'll order the fabrics and see which ones look best and go from there.
There's a lot of work in that, changing it from a bit of paper to a digital design, isn't there?
Yes.
I don't know if people realize it's not just scanning it in and it works. For a seamless design from scratch is a huge amount of work involved.
Yeah.
But it definitely pays off to take that time, and it's unique to your brand.
Yeah.
And I hope it stays that way, because in the world we're living in, it's a concern.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it is quite unique, and I love that print that I was talking about before.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome. So with your hardware, you design some of that as well, I understand.
I do. Like some of our flip locks, our turn locks, I think, like you mentioned, it got hard because everyone was carrying the same thing. And that's not something that I really like to do. If somebody else has it, I'm not going to step on their toes. So I want it to be my own. I want it to be unique. So being able to design hardware is really fun, but also a little scary because it's very expensive. And then sometimes things don't work out, or there's something is lost in translation with how things turn out in size, etc. So that's happened to me a couple times, that things are not the right size. So we got to go back to the drawing board. But usually if the product that is not the right size still works or functions properly, I'll still sell it, and I'll just let people know, like, this is not exactly what I was hoping for, but it's still good, and go from there.
Yeah, well, if it can still be used, people are going to appreciate it, aren't they? And I think people don't know what was in our head to start with, so they don't really know, but it's our personal disappointment, isn't it?
Yes, exactly right. Yeah.
So designing a piece of hardware, now you're going from a 2D image to a 3D mold, obviously. So do you do a lot of those different sketches and sections and things, or do you just tell them what you've got in mind?
Generally, if it's very specific, I will do a couple of different sketches from different angles so that they know thicknesses, where I need this, where I need that, or what its application is used for. I didn't always do that. And again, it led to it getting into my hands, and I was like, this is not what I wanted.
Yeah. We've got a very small market pool here in New Zealand. I mean, our population is less than 7 million, so, and I'm wanting to, all I think I can get away with is maybe some unique local zipper pulls. So I'm going through that at the moment. That's unique to New Zealand, but it's a process, because they don't know what I've got in my mind, so, but I'm keeping it very small.
Yeah. That's exciting though.
Yeah,
I love that.
It is. And then it's unique. And I do have people from all over the place and say, look, can I get this? And I'm like, but there's products available in the States. I mean, try Mormino, try Me Made Makes in England. It's like, they're all unique. And I kind of think, reach out to these people if you want something, because we don't necessarily know what people are looking for.
Right. Yeah. Very true.
So, and I'd say that people in your Facebook group would probably say, Lauren, we want this, this, and this. Is that right?
Yeah. And sometimes I can accommodate that. But again, just like you said, sometimes it's like, well, I mean, this other person is carrying it. So I don't want to step on toes. A lot of times I have reached out to that person though, and I've said like, hey, do you wholesale? I have a customer base here looking for it. Obviously I will credit you. So I've sold interfacing from cast iron handcrafted through my warehouse. And then I also sell double-sided tape from another company, Weft and Warp Co., just because they're products I like and recommend. And I want that crossover to be able to talk about that company too and get them some money.
And I think it's not much point us trying to reinvent the wheel. If something is perfect and it works, why would we try and do something? Yeah. And if we can support each other, I think that's really important. Really important.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
It's definitely like not an ecosystem, but like it's a group of people and we're all supporting each other. And I just think that's really cool.
especially in the environment we're in at the moment. Economically, it's really difficult. And I've
Yeah.
seen a lot of bag makers this year in New Zealand in particular saying, look, I'm not selling at my markets. There's just no money around.
Mm-mm.
My heart breaks for them because that's their passion. Yeah.
Yeah.
But we'll keep this discussion light, shall we? We won't go down the economic track.
Yeah.
So with sourcing your fabrics and things, because you've got some amazing bases, how do you go through that process?
A lot of the times my suppliers send me samples upon samples upon samples of these swatch cards, and it's one of my favorite things to be able to go through them and like just feel them, and knowing what I love and what has worked for me in the past, I'm able to, I don't want to say quickly discern what I like and what I don't, but I'm definitely able to eliminate the ones I don't, and then I'll hoard the ones I do like and slowly kind of go through them and figure out like, okay, there's a need for this, there's a need for this, or like there really isn't a need for this, that kind of a thing. So essentially that's what I do. From my bag making history, I kind of go through the products and think like, what do we need? Like as bag makers, like what are we looking for?
Yeah.
What gap is there? What void is there? So that's really fun for me.
So what's your favorite base to sew with? Like, because I know you do some amazing vinyls.
Yes, I really love vinyl, and I think my mid-weight luxe that's printed is one of my absolute favorites to work with because it's like 0.8 millimeter thick. So it's like the Goldilocks of vinyl. It's not too thin to where it's not going to hold up, and it's not too thick to where it's going to be hard for all machines to work with. And then there's absolutely no stretch in the material either. There is some shrinkage when you use a heat press, so you got to account for that, but like it feels nice. That's my favorite.
Yeah. So you're using some waterproof canvas and things like that as well, or some of these. What about these new bonded fabrics? Are you carrying any of those?
I do not have any of like the bonded nylon or anything like that. Again, part of me was like, you know what? Another shop already carries it in such a diverse line. I don't feel like what I have to offer in that could really set me apart or anything like that. So I kind of just like, you have that. I'll support them if I need it, you know?
And I really like watching your what's releasing this month, because it's kind of like sometimes we just need a bit of extra inspiration. You know, we've got our pattern we found and we want to make it. And I'm like, I've got my stash, but, you know, so that's really inspiring for people.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So don't stop doing that. We need that. Good. So you've got a big Facebook group, and that is, do you want to tell us a little bit about your community and how people can join it and etc.?
Yes. So my Facebook group, So Whatever, started, I want to say probably 8 years ago. And it was actually a group that I had created to do local sewing classes. So, and it was, I don't want to say it was geared toward teens, but I had already been teaching art classes to younger kids, young adults. So I was like, oh, I'll just call it So Whatever, because it's like, yeah, just So Whatever, you know?
Yeah.
And then I started going live to show people how I was making bags, and then decided to go live within that group, So Whatever. So I just used it as a group to go live in to show. So basically my YouTube channel, but it was in the Facebook group.
Right.
Until a friend of mine was like, why don't you put that on YouTube and make some money off the videos? And I was like, okay. But it basically just started out as a way for people to share knowledge about sewing in general. I never wanted it to be specific to one, which is kind of why it's not even branded. Like, it's very general. If you didn't know me, you're in the group, you don't know what it's about. Right. But it's just a general sewing group. And that's kind of where my preference for it is, so that it's a group for everybody. It's not necessarily like my group, because there are so many groups with so many rules. So I really wanted a group that was like, it's not that we don't have rules, it's just that there aren't that many. They're not super specific to where you're like, what day is it? Where is the moon in the sky? And is it okay to post this? And
it's very inclusive. If I want to post something just to say, oh, I made this, but I'm not happy with this, you know, you get some amazing responses. You know, like even when I started making bags and you're a little bit timid about what you're posting, it's like, because honestly, look at some of these bags people are making. They are better than the stuff you're buying uptown.
Yeah.
They're amazing. And it can be very intimidating. So please don't ever feel that way posting in Lauren's group.
Yeah.
Because honestly, it's a very inclusive community.
Yeah. And you can even ask, like, does anybody have any feedback for me? Like things I could do differently? Because I even need that. Like, hey, I did this. What can I do to have done that better next time instead of people just tearing you down? Like, let's be constructive and helpful and nice.
I think you should do that as a YouTube series, construction.
Yeah.
People can send you their pictures and say, please give me feedback. Because
that would be cool.
Everybody would want that. And you could do that so well. You'd be so good at that.
That was an idea.
But I mean, there's so many things that you have got. You wear so many hats. So we've looked a little bit about your brand. But before we leave that, what's your favorite piece of hardware that you sell?
I think if I had to the first thing that popped into my brain was the lever snap hooks. My favorite,
nice.
Just in the size, I feel like this is so much easier to use than a regular snap hook that you push in. But I do carry both, but a lot of people think these are way too big for standard bags, but I'm like, it's just so pretty.
I mean, to me, once you're over 1 inch, you need something really solid, right? And I'm seeing a lot of things they've still got the fine wire at the bottom. No, be 4 mil at least when you're above 1 inch.
Yeah.
And if you're going that big, go chunky. Make it a statement.
For sure.
Yeah.
I have thought about looking into getting some thinner hardware just for people who really don't want that.
Yeah.
I had a lady explain to me well, for spring bags, I like to use cotton fabrics and thinner snap hooks and things like that. I'm like, that is a very good point and not one that I would have thought of. But I feel like some of the thinner hardware you find on Amazon is just going to break.
Yeah.
I look at old bags that I made with that hardware and I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
Well, that's going to break.
So it's a real balance, isn't it, between the thin and strength? Yeah.
Definitely.
And then I don't know if people realize also there's different ways of getting your coating done, and one is more expensive than the other and wears much better. So what they might be seeing on Temu or these other places, you're not going to be having the quality coating on those.
Yeah, you can't guarantee it.
Yeah, they might look the same product, but I'm picking in 2 years' time it ain't looking like that.
Yeah.
Actually, maybe 6 months' time, to be honest. Because when you start and you think, oh, that's too, I can't afford that, and you buy the cheapest thing you can find, and you put hours and hours into making the bag.
Yeah.
And then you find the coating's worn off within a week of your new bag that you're wearing, and you're so excited about it, but it's,
Yeah, I have been there, and I would say the first 3 years of my bag making was exactly that. And I didn't have an industrial sewing machine or anything like that. So I knew that my bags would not hold up. So I didn't charge accordingly. So do you know the Brooklyn mini handbag from Swoon back in the day? So I would charge $60 for that.
Right.
That's not very much. I mean, it's still a lot of money to a person, but it's not a lot of money for the hours and hours of material. But I knew I wasn't sewing it with the best thread, the best machine. There were skip stitches. So
yeah,
some of them are still out in the world and I have seen them. And I'm like, how is that? Well, they got their money's worth. It's still holding up.
Because often it's in our head, isn't it? But it's a starting process when you first start making bags. And you just touched on thread. What's your favorite thread?
My favorite thread is definitely the Amon bonded nylon or polyester. I have no issues when I use it. I love the size of it for top stitching. I think it's perfect for construction because it's hard to rip apart.
Right.
That is my preference, but my second preference would be the Geeky Hardware variegated threads, the Tex 80, just because they're so incredibly beautiful.
I am waiting for my package of variegated threads to arrive from my manufacturer. Ooh. But shipping is horrendous. But I'm a bonded nylon. I love bonded nylon, but this is poly, obviously.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to try that.
Yeah.
But that's another one that's a big one to source and to get the right samples.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't imagine. I know people have asked, would you carry thread? And it's well, somebody else is already doing it really well. I'm not here to step on toes,
Yeah. I think for me, the door is open. There's no one here. New Zealand's so small, but we're so far away from everywhere else.
Yeah.
But I am looking at probably trying to find people I can say, look, I'd love to sell your range. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I sell of some Emmeline bags, things.
Yeah.
And because it's not worth me trying to
source and go out there when they've already done the research, and it is so expensive to do that research.
Yeah. You have pioneered so much, which is really encouraging for people. So you've got your bags, you've got your community. Now, I know I used to watch your tutorials quite regularly, religiously, but you have been very busy in another way of teaching, and you have set up your studio. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah. So we just finished out the year. I have goosebumps actually thinking I was like, oh yeah, I do have that. But we just finished our first year of classes, um, which is insane to me. So we built onto the warehouse that I purchased in 2021, and it's an office building. It's not a warehouse.
Right.
But it came with a good amount of land, and I knew eventually we might want to build on. And when I moved in, I thought one space could be the classroom, but we quickly filled it. So we had looked into moving and decided it's cheaper to build. Let's just stay here. And so we built on an industrial classroom space. So we have 16 industrial machines, one Skyver, cutting tables for every single person. We've got a really good audio system, video system in there so that any teacher is set up for success. And that has been what is so important to me after teaching so many different places and just not getting a good experience. And like that reflects on the students as well. Like if the students aren't set up for success, it's just a bad time. So it's been an absolute pleasure to be able to set up Teachers for Success to watch the students be successful and just get to sit back and watch it in a way. Like I'm still there, I'm still working, but I do feel like I get to sit back and stand there and just watch the learning happen, which is my favorite part.
That is such an accomplishment. And I must say, on behalf of everybody, thank you so much, because that was, I mean, I'm small scale, but that must have been a huge risk financially and emotionally and everything else for your family. Thank you for doing that, because what I have seen with the recent events in the last year or so is it's really bonded the community in the States in so many ways. What's your favorite thing when you're watching a class?
Probably just seeing all the bags come together, honestly. And like when people start off a class and they're like scared to sew on the industrial, and then they're finally sewing and they're like, this is easy. They're like, I was scared for nothing. And I'm like, I know. That's what I'm saying. I'm not here to sell industrial machines. That is not my job. I don't make money off of it, but I do want people to realize that if you are struggling with a domestic, you don't have to. Like, I would say, if anything, that would be my goal.
And I actually paid a lot more for my last domestic than I did my industrial. Now I've got a Juki industrial. And I mean, it's an 1181, so they're not the cheapest industrial, but it was a lot cheaper than my last domestic. And they don't take up as much room as what people think. Not by the time you need a table to put a domestic on. Right. You just can't put it in the cupboard.
Right. Yeah, you can't. Well, I mean, you could, but it would be a lot to reset up every time. Like you could take the head off and but I know Sunny Sewing Machine actually sells like a short table. I ordered one with a really short table to travel with to a Comic-Con that I was sewing at. So it is possible to have it on a really, really small table.
And I've had industrial machines for years. I mean, I can't even, I think I bought my first one about 30 years ago, and they used to be so heavy, you couldn't move them. They are just so different now. They come on wheels, they're easy to move and clean. They're not what they used to be. So if anyone's put off because they had one years ago, they are not what they used to be. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And when I first purchased the industrial machines, it was in hopes of traveling with them.
Right.
To do like sewing sessions all over the place, but it's just not feasible for me to be away from my family for that long. Like after thinking about it, it was kind of like, what? And then again, there's so much that goes into a learning setting that people may forget. And again, if you're not setting it up for success, then it's not going to be successful. So we have everything you need within that classroom. Like we have a survey that goes out to every class at the end, and everyone is like, I came with nothing and I didn't need anything. And I'm like, thank you.
Your job is done. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Like that is my favorite part. Like spoiling the teachers, so to speak, is my favorite part.
In talking to you and seeing what you've achieved, I see that your mind is always going to be looking for possibilities. How do you manage that? Because Dorothy's still young, right? You know, your family still needs you.
Yeah.
How do you do it?
I have a very good support system. My husband is very, very supportive. He actually left his job 2 years ago to be able to help me and to be able to take on more as a dad. Because before it was me working out of my home, taking care of Dorothy, taking care of the house, etc. So now some of the parental responsibility is lifted and shared a little more unfairly towards him. Like I feel like there are times where I'm like, oh, I haven't seen her all weekend, but I am working to find more balance because there is only so much time, and I am young, so there is time later to have bigger dreams.
Yes.
Yeah.
One step at a time.
Yes, exactly.
It's just not easy to follow that in your mind, is it, necessarily?
No, definitely not. Especially when there are times where I see other people doing different things. I'm like, oh, I need to be doing that. I feel like the whole community does that. Like, well, I need to be doing that. And it's like, well, they're in a season of life where they can be doing that, and that's okay. We don't all have to do the same thing.
We don't need to niche down, but we need to find what we do well.
Yeah.
And to really make that work rather than trying to do everything okay.
Right.
But I'm still maybe looking for the thing that is my thing. I'll just keep finding things and keep doing things until I do.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'll keep doing things okay until I find what I do really, really well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with the classes, tell us about what kinds of classes and bag patterns, like the variety and what happens.
So throughout this year, we've had so many different kinds of classes, and that has been what keeps it really fun and interesting for me, is that I'm able to sit down with the teacher and go, what does your perfect class look like? Right. What does that look like? Are they coming in with a pre-cut project? Are you pre-cutting the project? Are they cutting the project during class and then sewing? So every class has been different. I'm sure a lot of people wonder why our class prices vary so drastically, and that's because there have been classes with a pre-cut kit. So you literally just show up with nothing and you cut it. We've had classes where you bring your own materials and then you cut it and sew it. And then we've had classes where the materials are provided and you show up and cut that and that kind of a thing. We've had several open sews as well, because I feel like in classes there are always people there that are like, I actually don't need to learn anything. I just really wanted to hang out with you guys.
Yeah, I get that.
And I had seen that in classes before too. People are there with 17 projects there, and I'm like, wait, I'm teaching this, and they're like, I know, but if it's all the same, like, I'm just gonna do my own thing. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely, because that would be me. I'm like, I don't know that I'm gonna learn anything. I just want to hang out.
But I think part of that is sewing can be quite isolating. Yes. Especially if it's a hobby, if it's for emotional strength, because people sew for so many different reasons, whether it's to support their family or just keep them sane. But it can be quite isolating. So to have a group or somewhere that they can go every now and again, that's got to give them so much validation.
Yeah. And it's good for me too, because being online, it's easy to, I don't want to say disconnect, but kind of feel disconnected in a way. Like they're just comments, they're just but when you're all together and you get to have those conversations and chat about seam allowances and your favorite materials and what worked for you, that really is what helps me keep going with it.
Yeah. And often I see chats and comments and they can be taken the wrong way. Do you know what I mean? I'm like, that's not how I meant that at all. But you've already hurt that person's feelings.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And like, so to get to know people on a personal level, that takes all that away. Yeah. So to have that opportunity, I think that is
and
awesome.
We've gotten emails from people before class and we're like, oh no. And then like they're in class and they're the most lovely person in the world. So it's really helped me, especially not, I don't want to say judge, but like have any preconceived idea of what people are like. It's like, you know what? We all have bad days. We all have no tone in an email, that kind of thing. So that is one of my favorite things, is to just, every person is exactly the same when they come into this and they're just here to learn. The very first class that we had was my class. I was teaching a very simple pattern. And one of the students said to me before she left, I have taken so many classes and this is the first time I have finished without crying. And like, yeah, I cried. I was like, that is exactly what I'm trying to build, because we all have different learning abilities. So many of us are incredibly anxious, like, myself included. So it's just really nice to know that she felt comfortable and at ease for the most part to be able to finish her bag.
That's validation, isn't it? Right there.
Yeah.
That's
Absolutely.
awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
So where do you see that going in the next 12 months?
So I actually already have the calendar year filled out for next year of who's coming to teach. We have some classes already on sale, and I'm just excited to get new teachers in, because the very first year I reached out to a very core group of people that I was like, I know they can go with the flow. I know they're going to be open and honest with me. Like, I feel good about this. So I had mostly closer colleagues come teach, essentially, because we had machine issues. We'd have, just different issues that would happen in class. And I feel like we are a well-oiled machine at this point. Machines are working perfectly. Like, we know what we're doing. The sky's the limit at this point. Anybody who wants to come, we'd love to have you.
That's great. So do you see the need to expand that in the future, or you're just going to keep this working as it is and then go from there?
Yeah. I'm really enjoying exactly how it is. I love that everything is where we need it. And we do have a larger event coming up in April where we're going to have a domestic classroom on one side of our warehouse, and then we'll have our industrial classroom, and then demonstrations in the kitchen. We had to do it last year out of necessity, but this year we're doing it for fun. So I'm really excited to see what that looks like. Yeah.
That seems lots of fun.
Yeah.
And now, just a step totally set sideways, you also design patterns, and you have been for some time. And
yes,
you obviously have been too busy to do much of that. Do you see any patterns in your future?
I wish. I have actually one I need to finish for public release. It was our So Whatever project box that we released in July, but we still have a handful of them left. So I'm keeping that pattern exclusive to the box until they sell out. But I love designing patterns. I will still do it, just without writing them.
Right.
Like, I'll have ideas in my head, but eventually I have a plan for that I can't speak to just yet. But eventually I will have more patterns in a different way.
Right. Yep. I think AI is going to be an issue for pattern designers, right? But that's going to make us be more creative and more outside the box, because AI can only work on what it's been done. It can't work on what hasn't been done. So I think in the next couple of years, we're going to see a lot of changes. We're not going to see any basic patterns, because people are going to be able to put that or get that AI, right? Well, that's my prediction anyway.
Yeah, so, I hadn't even considered it. My brother-in-law really loves ChatGPT, and he told me a couple of years ago, he was like, well, I had it write sewing instructions. He's like, so just a thought. And I was like, I'll just write it. Thank you. But it's very, very true that people could be using that for those reasons.
Yeah. I saw someone suggest it in a designer group a couple of weeks ago, and I was going to say, have you tried it? Because I did have a play. I use it in my business all the time.
Yeah.
But just for grammar and for suggestions, but nothing to do with my patterns, because I don't want to put my pattern into GPT chat, because it can use it for other people's patterns then, I think. I think that's how it works. And I'm like, no, I'm not putting it out there for it to use. But it didn't get it right. It was very, very formal. No way how I would write. And I suppose you can teach it to write in your manner, but I think it'll come with this. I think there's already an app that you can do a tote in any size you want. You just put in your sizes and it gives you the pattern pieces. Oh, wow. It's not going to be long. So I think that's where it's going to force us to be more creative and come up with new ways of doing things. Yeah. Which I think isn't a bad thing, ultimately. Yeah. No. But I love your tailor tote. In fact, I've got one sitting up there. And I got a really nice review from someone who bought one of mine a couple of weeks ago, saying it is the best shape, size, and things that. So I thought I must pass that on to you. So, but that's a while ago now, the tailor tote.
And I had worked on that pattern for about a year and a half before it even came out, just to find the time. And I think my one regret with that is that I was not able to do as much with the illustrations as I would want to, because my pedestal of designers is swoon patterns. Old school swoon patterns, and then Sincerely Jen, who has followed the swoon format essentially. And I just think those are the easiest to follow for beginner, etc., because of those very simple illustrations. So that's something that I have spent hours and hours and hours on with the Sarah bag. And then I redid the Peekaboo beauty bag with those same illustrations. And if I had a month off of everything. I would love to redo all of my old patterns in that style. It's just so much work.
The diagrams and things, the illustrations are a lot of work.
Yeah.
I've done 2 with illustrations, the others with photos.
Yeah.
Photos are much quicker, but
comparatively,
I
yes,
think they're
definitely.
not
But
quick.
they're still not quick.
No way. Not by the time you edit them or do whatever. Definitely not quick. But I think I agree. And for visually, you're not struck with all these colors and things on the page. But on both those patterns, I had 2 people go, oh no, I prefer photos. See, I do my patterns in columns, right? And a lot of people are like, oh, why? And I'm like, I'm from an age where any technical writing was in columns. Our school books and everything was in columns. And that's how I just started doing it.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me, So I guess we all do our own.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. And I think that is something very special as well. I know that there are so many people that learn in different ways. So being able to find a designer that speaks to your way of learning is so important. But it does make it hard, especially for me, for someone who does tutorials and wants to share all these different patterns. When my brain is already like stretched so thin to have to read a new one and see a different style, I'm like, what is this now? It can be hard, but
yeah, I did a free pattern recently and it blew my mind. I'm like, I just can't understand this. And it is very basic bag, but I could not get my head around the way it was worded. It was just the way it was written. And I'm sure there's people who were the same with my patterns.
Right, exactly. And that's the hardest part about being a pattern designer and not taking those comments personally.
Yeah. At the end of the day, you can't please everybody.
No. And not your specifically, but one person's knowledge of technology can't be compared to someone else's. Like setting up patterns is very difficult. Learning a new, it's all really hard. And I know some people might be like, well, then don't release patterns. But you still have ideas. You still have these things that might speak to somebody. I love the I think so patterns, and most people hate them, but I love them because they are a blank canvas. They are not well described. And I love that because I'm like, I'll figure it out.
Yeah. It's funny you're saying that. I had a customer ring because I've just recently bought the hardware business in New Zealand. And she said, I need to do my order over the phone. And I said, oh, you can do it on the website. I don't know how to use the website. And I said, okay, tell me what you want.
Yeah.
And she says, I've learned how to give them my credit card number. And I'm like, man, we take so much for granted. It's like we can't assume people know. There's a lot to it.
Yep.
We've got some quick fire questions that we go through for that have been a standard ask. What is your first piece of advice for a beginner bag maker?
It is always give yourself grace. Yeah. Give yourself time. Take it one step at a time. Don't compare yourself to anybody else because that's when you stop making stuff. When you're like, oh, well, it's never going to look that good. Like I've been making for 8 years and my stuff still doesn't look as good as other people's. And I'm not sitting here upset about it. It just means you have to try harder. You've got to take that extra steps and you got to give yourself grace to be able to keep going.
Yeah. And photos can be deceptive. When people put a picture up, you can hide which side you take the picture
off. Oh, yeah.
And you can edit that picture. So don't believe all the pictures you've seen and think you need to keep up to that level.
No.
Yeah. I think that's important. And so what tips would you give them on how to start as far as materials and selection of choice?
I would say stick to your budget. Like don't buy expensive things because if you know that your skills are not up to a certain level, I think I don't want to say it's a waste of money, but it's just not necessary. Like learn those skills, learn those techniques first, and then go on to more expensive materials. Like don't start out with cork bags. That's not a good plan.
Yeah.
Unless you have money to waste, then you do you. I'm not here to judge. I'm not here to make the rules, but I would say definitely start off with simple projects, simple materials, bargain bin, just to start and try.
I'd even say that with a new pattern. I never make a new pattern the first time with my expensive material. It doesn't matter who's designed it.
Yeah.
It's like just to get it in your head and to figure out what I want to change.
Yes, exactly. Like, oh, I'll make it right the first time, but what's going to be different next time?
What might I add and what might I remove? Yeah. So, as far as running a business for sewing, the sewing community, is there any advice you've got for those who are running businesses or who might plan to run a business?
Try to focus on stuff that you love, that speaks to you and isn't just what everyone else has 10 times over. Like for me, I've manufactured a lot of my own designs and products because that is what I wanted to see in the world. That is my voice. That is what I wanted to create. And it's not copying what anybody else has to a point. I mean, clips already existed, but I was like, I want them rainbow and glittery.
Yeah.
So I made them happen. And now they're
Yeah.
everywhere, which is a bummer. Like other people have
Yeah.
copied it, but I mean, you can't control that.
Nope, you can't,
Yeah.
unfortunately. And it's like the other thing I said to someone locally recently is just find one product you're passionate about. So we've got someone locally who's just going to be stocking webbing, because it gives you so many more options within that product to get something that's different without feeling you need to outlay for everything. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And there's some amazing webbing I'm seeing online, and I'm like, I want that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, as far as contacting you, now I know people try and send me a Facebook message for business things. That does not work for me. What is the best way for people? Because you've got staff as well that take care of different things. What's the best way if people want to know about a product, for example? What should they do? How should they contact you?
My email is mormino@gmail.com, and that is just my inbox, and I still take customer emails through there. There's also service at Mormino, and that one is customer service, so you may not get my answer. A lot of times they do forward me emails, though. They're like, I don't know how to answer this one. That's going to be you. Yeah, but sometimes Instagram or even just YouTube comments as well. I check those daily to respond, but it doesn't show me replies.
Yeah.
So that's hard if you want to have a back and forth conversation.
Yeah. And the awkward one about social media notifications is sometimes they come a day late and you're trying to respond to people and you're like, hang on, they sent that yesterday, but you've just got it today.
Yeah.
So that's why I suggest people email for a business related query, like if the order's gone missing or they want something urgently, email.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So as far as the holidays, are you going to be closed for a period of time? Are you looking forward to a break?
We do take a couple of days off here and there throughout the holidays, but we don't have any like large chunks of time off. I'll be going to visit family in DC, which I'm excited about. We'll have all of the cousins together. My sister has 4 kids. My other sister has 3 kids, and I just have the one. So getting them all together is always a chaotic mess, but it's memories. You get to leave after that. So that'll be exciting. And then we don't have any classes in January.
Right.
So I am looking forward to weekends off.
Yeah, that makes sense. So as far as the studio and the shop, do you have a shop that's open that people can come and shop, or is it all online?
So it is mostly online, but we do have it so that it is shoppable in person. We don't have open hours. We just ask that you send us an email if you want to come shop and set up an appointment. We are mostly a warehouse, so we kind of look like trolls half the time. We're dressed in just pajamas or comfortable clothes. We haven't showered in days. Not true, but there are often times where I'm like, oh, somebody's here. Like, I'm going to go hide in the bathroom.
So you mean you look like real people?
Yeah, pretty much, but like worse than real people. So
now I have heard you mention a few times how to access where you are. Do you want to tell the listeners where you are, how easy it is to find you, etc.?
Yeah, so we are actually located in the Midwest. We're in Illinois, 30 minutes outside of St. Louis. So we're really close to an international airport, which is wonderful. And then we're 10 minutes from like any nicer hotels. So it's not too terrible. But we're just in a little office building complex type thing. We're the only standalone building at the end of the street. And it is not it's not in a really public place, which is nice. We don't want a lot of visitors, but we're happy to have people come shop because there is so much to be said for being able to touch and feel all the fabrics and look at everything. So we have a couple of people who come by at least once a month, I would say, just to come and shop and check everything out. So we love that.
Yeah. I've just got a little thing I've built for my business and I've put a wall up with hang hooks for all the hardware. And it's true, if they can see it or touch it, they remember what they want to start with because you don't remember because the visual cue is great. But I'm like, I can't sell this stuff. It's all too pretty.
It's too big. I don't want it to go anywhere.
Yeah, yeah. It has been really cool talking to you, Lauren, and I really appreciate you taking the time because you have so many hats. And all the best to your holidays and your family. I hope you have a great time. So,
Yes, you too.
yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I'll let you go. And thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. So we have so many things coming up on Bag Chat. And if you are taking a break with your family over the holidays, be safe, be careful, take care of each other. And if you like what you've seen today, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe. Hit that little button down below because the algorithm does like it. If you're having a break over the holidays, please stay safe and take care of each other. And thank you for tuning in for another episode of Bag Chat.